Chapter 9, Transformer. Bink was thrown into a pit. A pile of hay broke his fall, and a wooden roof set on four tall posts shaded him from the sun. Other than that, his prison was barren and bleak indeed. The walls were of some stone-like substance, too hard to dig into with his bare hands, too sheer to climb. The floor was packed earth. He walked around it. The wall was solid all around, and too high for him to surmount. He could almost touch the top when he jumped and reached up, but a lattice of metal bars across the top sealed him in. He might, with special effort, get high enough to catch hold of one of those bars, but then all he would be able to do would be to hang there. It might represent exercise, but it wouldn't get him out, so the cage was tight. He had hardly come to this conclusion before soldiers came to stand at the grate, shaking rust onto him. They stood in the shade of the roof while one of them squatted down to unlock the little door set in that grate and swing it up and open. Then they dropped a person through. It was the woman, Fanchon. Bink jumped across, wrapped his arms around her before she hit the straw, breaking her fall. They both sprawled in the hay. The door slammed shut and the lock clicked. "Now, I knew my beauty didn't overwhelm you," she remarked as they disentangled. "I was afraid you'd break a leg," Bink said defensively. "I almost did when they threw me in here." She glanced down at her knobby knees, showing beneath her dull skirt. A break couldn't hurt the appearance of either leg. Not far off the mark. Bink had never seen a more homely girl than this one. But what was she doing here? Why should the evil magician throw his stooge in the den with his prisoner? This was no way to trick the captive into talking. The proper procedure would be to tell Bink she had talked and offer him his freedom for confirming the information. Even if she were genuine, she still should not have been confined with him. She could have been imprisoned separately. Then the guards would tell each one that the other had talked. Now, if she had been beautiful, they might have thought she could vamp him into telling, but as she was, not a chance. It just didn't seem to make much sense. "Why didn't you tell him about the shield stone?" Bink inquired, not certain with what irony he intended it. If she were a fake, she could not have told, but she also should not have been dumped in here. If she were genuine, she must be loyal to Xanth, but then why had she said she would tell Trent where the shield stone was? "I told him," she said. She had told him. Now Bink hoped she was a phony. "Yes," she said, looking him straight in the eye. "I told him how it was set under the throne in the king's palace in the North Village." Bink tried to assess the ramifications of this statement. It was the wrong location, but did she know this? Or was she trying to trick him into a reaction, a revelation of its real location, while the guards listened? Or was she a true exile who knew the location and had lied about it? That would account for Trent's reaction. But if Trent's catapult lobbed an elixir bomb on the palace of Xanth, not only would it fail to disrupt the shield, it would alert the king, or at least the more alert ministers who were not fools, to the nature of the threat. The damping out of magic in that vicinity would quickly give it away. Had Trent actually lobbed his bomb, and had he now lost all hope of penetrating Xanth? The moment the threat was known, they would move the shield stone to a new secret location, so that no information from exiles would be valid. No, if that had happened, Trent would have turned Fanchon into a toad and stepped on her, and he would not have bothered to keep Bink prisoner. Bink might have been killed or released, but not simply kept, so nothing that drastic had happened. Anyway, there had not been time for all that. "I see you don't trust me," Fanchon said. A fair analysis. "I can't afford to," he admitted. "I don't want anything to happen to Xanth." "Why should you care, since you got kicked out?" "I knew the rule. I was given a fair hearing." "Fair hearing!" she exclaimed indignantly. "The king didn't even read Humphrey's note or taste the water from the spring of life." Bink paused again. How would she know that? "Oh, come on," she said. "I passed through your village only hours after your trial. It was the talk of the town, how the magician Humphrey had authenticated your magic, but the king—" Okay, Bink said. Obviously she had come from Xanth, but he still wasn't sure how far he could trust her. Yet she must know the Shieldstone's location, and hadn't told it. Unless she had told it, and Trent didn't believe her, so was waiting for a corroboration from Bink. But she had announced the wrong location, no purpose in that, regardless. Bink could challenge her on it, but that would still not give away the right location. There were 1,000 potential spots, so probably she meant what she said. She had tried to fool Trent and had not succeeded. So the balance in Bink's mind shifted. Now he believed she was from Xanth, and she had not betrayed it. That was what the available evidence suggested. How complex could Trent's machinations become? Maybe he had a shield. Maybe he had a mundane machine that could somehow pick up news from inside the shield. Or, more likely, he had a magic mirror set up in the magic zone just outside the shield so he could learn interior news. No, in that case, he could have ascertained the location of the shield stone directly. Bink felt dizzy. He didn't know what to think, but he certainly wasn't going to mention the key location. I wasn't exiled if that's what you're thinking, Fanchon said. They don't yet ban people for being ugly. I emigrated voluntarily. Voluntarily? Why? Well, I had 2 reasons. What 2 reasons? She looked at him. I'm afraid you will not believe either one. Try me and see. First, the magician Humphrey told me it was the simplest solution to my problem. What problem? Bink was hardly in a good mood. She gave him another she gave him another straight look that amounted to a stare. Must I spell it out? Bing found himself reddening. Obviously, her problem was her appearance. Fanchon was a young woman, but she was not plain, not homely, but ugly, the living proof that youth and health were not necessarily beauty. No clothing, no makeup could help her nearly enough. Only magic could do that, which seemed to make her departure from Xanth nonsensical. Was her judgment as warped as her body? Faced with the social necessity of changing the subject, he fixed on another object and an aspect of his thought. But there is no magic in Mundania. Precisely. Again his logic stumbled. Fanchon was as difficult to talk with as to look at. You mean magic makes you what you are? What a marvel of tact he demonstrated. But she did not chide him for his lack of social grace. Yes, more or less. Why didn't Humphrey charge you his fee? He couldn't stand the sight of me? Worse and worse. What was your other reason for leaving Xanth? That I shall not tell you at this time. It figured. She had said he wouldn't believe her. She had said he wouldn't believe her reasons, and he had believed the first one, so she wouldn't tell him the other. Typical female logic. Well, we seem to be prisoners together, Bing said, glancing around the pit again. It remained as dismal as ever. Do you think they're going to feed us? Certainly, Fanchon said. Trent will come around and dangle bread and water at us and ask us which one would like to give him the information. That one will be fed. It will become increasingly difficult to turn him down as time passes. You have a gruesomely quick comprehension. I'm gruesomely smart, she said. In fact, it is fair to say I am as smart as I am ugly. Yes, indeed. Are you smart enough to figure out how to get out of here? No, I don't think escape is possible, she said, shaking her head in a definite yes. Oh, Bing said, taken aback. Her words said no, her gesture said yes. Was she crazy? No, she knew the guards were listening, though they were out of sight. So she sent them one message while sending Bink another, which meant she had figured out an escape already. It was now afternoon. A shaft of sunlight spilled through the grate, finding its route past the edge of the roof. Just as well, Bing thought. It would get unbearably dank in here if the sun never reached the bottom. Trent came to the gate. I trust you to have made your acquaintance, he said pleasantly. Are you hungry? Now it comes, Fanchon muttered. I apologize for the inconvenience of your quarters, Trent said, squatting down with perfect aplomb. It was as if he were meeting them in a clean office. If you both will give me your word not to depart these premises or interfere with our activities in any way, I shall arrange a comfortable tent for you. Therein lies subversion, Fanchon said to Bink. Once you start accepting favors, you become obligated. Don't do it. She was making extraordinary sense. No deal, Bink said. You see, Trent continued smoothly, if you were in a tent and you tried to escape, my guards would have to put arrows in you, and I don't want that to happen. It would be most uncomfortable for you, and it would imperil my source of information. So it is vital that I have you confined by one means or another, by word or bond, as it were. This pit has the sole virtue of being secure. You can always let us go, Bink said, since you aren't going to get the information anyway. If that ruffled the evil magician, he did not show it. Here is some cake and wine, Trent said, lowering a package on a cord. Neither Bink nor Fanchon reached for it, though Bink suddenly felt hungry and thirsty. The odors of spice wafted through the pit temptingly. Obviously, the package contained fresh, good things. Please take it, Trent said. I assure you it is neither poisoned nor drugged. I want you both in good health. For when you change us into toads, Bink asked loudly. What did he have to lose, really? No, I am afraid you have called my bluff on that. Toads do not speak intelligibly, and it is important to me that you speak. Could the evil magician have lost his talent in the course of his long mundane exile? Bink began to feel better. The package touched the straw. Fanchon shrugged and squatted, untying it. Sure enough, cake and wine. Maybe one of us better eat now, she said. If nothing happens in a few hours, the other eats. Ladies first, Bing said. If the food were drugged and she were a spy, she wouldn't touch it. Thank you, she broke the cake in half. Pick a piece, she said. You eat that one, Bing said, pointing. Very nice, Trent said from above. You trust neither me nor each other, so you are working out conventions to safeguard your interests. But it really isn't necessary. If I wanted to poison either of you, I would merely pour it on your heads. Fanchon took a bite of cake. This is very good, she said. She uncorked the wine and took a swig. This too. But Bink remained suspicious. He would wait. I have been considering your cases, Trent said. Fanchon, I will be direct. I can transform you into any other life form, even another human being. He squinted down at her. How would you like to be beautiful? Uh-oh. If Fanchon were not a spy, this would be a compelling offer. The ugly one converted to beauty. Go away, Fanchon said to Trent, before I throw a mud ball at you. But then she thought of something else. If you're really going to leave us here, at least give us some sanitary facilities, a bucket and a curtain. If I had a lovely posterior, I might not mind the lack of privacy, but as it is, I prefer to be modest. Aptly expressed, Trent said. He gestured, and the guards brought the items and lowered them through the hole in the grate. Fanchon set the pot in one corner and removed pins from her straggly hair to tack the cloth to the two walls, forming a triangular chamber. Bink wasn't sure why a girl of her appearance should affect such modesty. Surely no one would gawk at her exposed flesh regardless of its rondure, unless she really were extremely sensitive, with her remarks making light of what remained a serious preoccupation. In that case, it did make sense. A pretty girl could express shock and distress if someone saw her bare torso, but privately she would be pleased if the reaction were favorable. Fanchon had no such pretense. Bink was sorry for her and for himself. It would have made the confinement much more interesting if his companion had been scenic, but actually he was grateful for the privacy too. Natural functions would otherwise have been awkward. So he was full circle. She had defined the problem before he ever started thinking it out. She obviously did have a quicker mind. He's not fooling about making you beautiful, Bink said. It wouldn't work. No, Trent's talent. I know his talent, but it would only aggravate my problem, even if I were willing to betray Xanth. This was strange. She did not want beauty. Then why her extraordinary sensitivity about her appearance? Or was this some other ploy to get him to tell the location of the Shieldstone? He doubted it. She obviously was from Xanth. No outsider could have guessed about his experience with the water of the Spring of Life and the Senile King. Time passed. Evening came. Fanchon suffered no ill effects, so Bink ate and drank his share of the meal. At dusk, it rained. The water poured through the lattice. The roof provided some shelter, but enough slanted in to wet them down thoroughly anyway. But Fanchon smiled. Good, she whispered. The fates are with us tonight. Good. Bink shivered in his wet clothing and watched her wonderingly. She scraped with her fingers in the softening floor of the pit. Bink walked over to see what she was up to, but she waved him away. Make sure the guards don't see, she whispered. Small danger of that. The guards weren't interested. They had taken shelter from the rain and were not in sight. Even if they had been close, it was getting too dark to see. What was so important about this business? She was scooping out mud from the floor and mixing it with hay, heedless of the rain. Bink couldn't make any sense of it. Was this her way of relaxing? Did you know any girls in Xanth? Fanchon inquired. The rain was slacking off, but the darkness protected her secret work from Bink's comprehension as well as that of the guards. It was a subject Bink would have preferred to avoid. I don't see what, she moved over to him. I'm making bricks, idiot, she whispered fiercely. Keep talking, and watch out for any lights. If you see anyone coming, say the word chameleon. I'll hide the evidence in a hurry. She glided back to her corner. Chameleon. There was something about that word. Now he had it. The chameleon lizard he had seen just before starting on his quest to the good magician, his omen of the future. The chameleon had died abruptly. Did this mean his time was come? Talk, Fanchon urged. Cover my sounds. Then, in a conversational tone, you did know some girls? Some, Bing said. Bricks? What for? Were they pretty? Her hands were blurred by the night, but he could hear the little slaps of mud and rustle of hay. She could be using the hay to contribute fiber to the mud brick, but the whole thing was crazy. Did she intend to build a brick privy? Or not so privily. Or not so pretty, she prompted him. Oh, pretty, he said. It seemed he was stuck with this topic. If the guards were listening, they would pay more attention to him talking about pretty girls than to her slapping mud. Well, if that's the way she wanted it. My fiancée, Sabrina, was beautiful. It is beautiful. And the sorceress Iris seemed beautiful, but I met others who weren't. Once they get old or married, the rain had abated. Bing saw a light approaching. Chameleon, he murmured, again experiencing inner tension. Omens always were accurate if understood correctly. Women don't have to get ugly when they marry, Fanchon said. The sound had changed. Now she was concealing the evidence. Some start out that way. She certainly was conscious of her condition. This made him wonder again why she had turned down Trent's offer of beauty. I met a lady centaur on my way to the magician Humphrey, Bink said, finding it difficult to concentrate even on so natural a subject as this in the face of the oddities of his situation. Imprisoned in a pit with an ugly girl who wanted to make bricks. She was beautiful in a statuesque kind of a way. Of course, she was basically a horse. Bad terminology. I mean, from the rear side, I rode her back, conscious of what the guards might think he was saying, not that he should even care what they thought. He eyed the approaching light. He saw it mainly by reflections from the bars. She was half equine. She gave me a ride through Centaur country. The light diminished. It must be a guard on routine patrol. False alarm, he whispered, then in conversational tone. But there was one really lovely girl on the way to the magician. Her name was, he paused to concentrate. When? But she was abysmally stupid. I hope the Gap Dragon didn't catch her. You were in the Gap? For a while, until the dragon chased me off. I had to go around it. I'm surprised you know of it. I had thought there was a forget spell associated with it, because it was not on my map, and I'd never heard of it until I encountered it. Though, how is it that I remember in that case? I lived near the Gap, she said. You lived there? When was it made? What's its secret? It was always there. There was a forget spell. I think the magician Humphrey put it there. But if your associations are really strong, you remember, at least for a while. Magic only goes so far. Maybe that's it. I'll never forget my experience with the dragon in the shade. Fanchon was making bricks again. Any other girls? Bink had the impression she had more than casual interest in the matter. Was it because she knew the people of the chasm region? Let's see. There was one other I met. An ordinary girl. D. She had an argument with the soldier I was with, Crombie. He was a woman hater, or at least professed to be, and she walked out. Too bad. I rather liked her. Oh, I thought you preferred pretty girls. Look, don't be so damn sensitive, he snapped. You brought up the subject. I like D better than... Oh, never mind. I'd have been happier talking about plans to escape. Sorry, she said. I knew about your journey around the chasm. Win and D are friends of mine, so naturally I'm concerned. Friends of yours? Both of them? Pieces of puzzle began to fit together. What is your association with the sorceress Iris? Fanchon laughed. None at all. If I were the sorceress, do you think I would look like this? Yes, Bing said. If you tried beauty and it didn't work and you still wanted power and figured you could somehow get it through an ignorant traveler, that would explain why Trent couldn't tempt you with the promise of beauty. That would only ruin your cover, and you could be beautiful any time you wanted. So you might follow me out in disguise. Nobody would suspect, and of course you would not help another magician take over Xanth. So I'd come right out here into Mundania, where there is no magic, she finished, therefore no illusion. That gutted his case. Or did it? Maybe this is the way you actually look. I may never have seen the real Iris there on her island. And how would I get back into Xanth? For that, Bink had no answer. He responded with bluster. Well, why did you come here? Obviously, the non-magic aspect has not solved your problem. Well, it takes time. Time to cancel out magic? Certainly. When dragons used to fly out over Mundania before the shield was set up, it would take them days or weeks to fade, maybe even longer. Magician Humphrey says there are many pictures and descriptions of dragons and other magic beasts in mundane texts. The mundanes don't see dragons anymore, so they think the old texts are fantasy, but this proves that it takes a while for the magic in a creature or a person to dissipate. So a sorceress could retain her illusion for a few days after all, Big said. She sighed. Maybe so, but I'm not Iris, though I certainly wouldn't mind being her. I had an entirely different and compelling reason I had entirely different and compelling reasons to leave Xanth. Yes, I remember. One was to lose your magic, whatever it was, and the other you wouldn't tell me. I suppose you deserve to know. You're going to have it out of me one way or another. I learned from Win and Dee what sort of person you were, and so Win did get away from the dragon? Yes, thanks to you, she. A light was coming. Chameleon, Pink said. Fanchon scrambled to hide her bricks. This time the light came all the way to the pit. I trust you've not been flooded down there, Trent's voice inquired. If we were, we'd swim away from here, Bink said. Listen, magician, the more uncomfortable you make us, the less we want to help you. I am keenly aware of that, Bink. I would much prefer to provide you with a comfortable tent. No. Bink, I find it difficult to comprehend why you should be so loyal to a government that treated you so shabbily. What do you know about that? My spies have, of course, been monitoring your dialogues, but I have guessed it readily enough, knowing how old and stubborn the Storm King must be by now. Magic manifests in diverse forms, and when the definitions become too narrow, well, it doesn't make any difference here, the magician persisted, sounding quite reasonable in contrast to Bink's unreason. It may be that you do lack magic, Bink, though I hardly think Humphrey would be wrong about about a thing like that. But you have other qualities to recommend you, and you would make an excellent citizen. He's right, you know, Fanchon said. You do deserve better than you were given. Which side are you on? Bink demanded. She sighed in the dark. She sounded very human. It was easier to appreciate that quality when he couldn't see her. I'm on your side, Bink. I admire your loyalty. I'm just not sure it's deserved. Why don't you tell him where the shield zone is then, if you know it? Because with all its faults, Xanth remains a nice place. The senile king won't live forever. When he dies, they'll have to put in Magician Humphrey, and he'll make things better, even if he does complain about the time it's wasting him. Maybe some new or young magician is being born right now to take over after that. It'll work out somehow. It always has before. The last thing Xanth needs is to be taken over by a cruel, evil magician who can turn all of his opposition into turnips. Trent's chuckle came down from above. My dear, you have a keen mind and a sharp tongue. Actually, I prefer to turn my opponents into trees. They are more durable than turnips. I don't suppose you could concede, merely for the sake of argument, that I might make a better ruler than the present king. He's got a point, you know, Bink said, smiling cynically in the dark. Which side are you on? Fanchon demanded, mimicking the tone Bink had used before. But it was Trent who laughed. I like you two, he said. I really do. You have good minds and good loyalty. If you would only give that loyalty to me, I would be prepared to make substantial concessions. For example, I might grant you veto power over any transformations I made. You could thus choose the turnips. So we'd be responsible for your crimes, Fanchon said. That sort of power would be bound to corrupt us very soon, until we were no different from you. Only if your basic fiber were not superior to mine, Trent pointed out. And if it were not, then you would never have been any different from me. You merely have not yet been subjected to my situation. It would be best if you discovered this, so as not to be unconscious hypocrites. Bink hesitated. He was wet and cold, and he did not relish spending the night in this hole. Had Trent been one to keep his word 20 years ago? No, he hadn't. He had broken his word freely in pursuit of power. That was part of what had defeated him. No one could afford to trust him, not even his friends. The magician's promises were valueless. His logic was a tissue of rationalization designed only to get one of the prisoners to divulge the location of the shield stone. Veto power over transformations? Bink and Fanchon would be the first to be transformed. Once the evil one had no further need of them. Bink did not reply. Fanchon remained silent. After a moment, Trent departed. And so we weather temptation number 2, Fanchon remarked. But he's a clever and unscrupulous man. It will get harder. Bink was afraid she was right. Next morning, the slanting sunlight baked the crude bricks. They were hardly hard yet, but at least it was a start. Fanchon placed the items in the privacy cubicle so that they could not be seen from above. She would set them out again for the afternoon sun, if all went well. The Trent came by with more food, fresh fruit and milk. I dislike putting it on this footing, he said, but my patience is wearing thin. At any time they might move the shield stone routinely, rendering your information valueless. If one of you does not give me that information I need today, tomorrow I shall transform you both. You, Bink, will be a cockatrice. You, Fanchon, a basilisk. You will be confined in the same cage. Bink and Fanchon looked at each other with complete dismay. Cockatrice and basilisk. two names for the same thing, a winged reptile hatched from a yolkless egg laid by a rooster and hatched by a toad in the warmth of a dung heap. The stench of its breath was so bad that it wilted vegetation and shattered stone, and the very sight of its face would cause other creatures to keel over dead. Basilisk, the little king of the reptiles. The chameleon of his omen had metamorphosed into the likeness of a basilisk just before it died. Now he had been reminded of the chameleon by a person who could not have known about that omen, and threatened with transformation into surely death was thawing nigh. It's a bluff, Fanchon said at last. He can't really do it. He's just trying to scare us. He's succeeding, Bink muttered. Perhaps a demonstration would be in order, Trent said. I ask no person to take my magic on faith when it is so readily demonstrable. It is necessary for me to perform regularly to restore my full talent after the long layoff in Mundania, so the demonstration is quite convenient for me. He snapped his fingers. Allow the prisoners to finish their meal, he said to the guard who reported. Then remove them from their cell. He left. Now Fanchon was glum for another reason. He may be bluffing, but if they come down in here, they'll find the bricks. That will finish us anyway. Not if we move right out, giving them no trouble, Bink said. They won't come down here unless they have to. Let's hope so, she said. When the guards came, Bink and Fanchon scrambled up the rope ladder the moment it was dropped. We're calling the magician's bluff, Bink said. There was no reaction from the soldiers. The party marched eastward across the isthmus towards Xanth. Within sight of the shield, Trent stood beside a wire cage. Soldiers stood in a ring around him, arrows knocked to bows. They all wore smoked glasses. It looked very grim. Now, I caution you, Trent said as they arrived. Do not look directly at each other's faces after the transformation. I cannot restore the dead to life. If this were another scare tactic, it was effective. Fanchon might doubt, but Bink believed. He remembered Justin Tree, the legacy of Trent's ire of 20 years ago. The omen loomed large in his mind. First to be a basilisk, then to die. Trent caught Bink's look of apprehension. Have you anything to say to me? He inquired, as if routinely. Yes. How did they manage to exile you without getting turned into toads or turnips or worse? Trent frowned. That was not precisely what I meant, Bink, but, in the interest of harmony, I will answer. An aide I trusted was bribed to put a sleep spell on me. While I slept, they carried me across the shield. How do you know it won't happen again? You can't stay awake all the time, you know. I spent much time pondering the whole problem in the long early years of my exile. I concluded that I had brought the deception upon myself. I had been faithless to others, and so others were faithless to me. I was not entirely without honor. I breached my given word only for what I deemed to be sufficient cause, yet that's the same as lying, Bink said. I did not think so at the time, but I dare say my reputation in that respect did not improve in my absence. It is ever the privilege of the victor to present the loser as completely corrupt, thus justifying the victory. Nevertheless, my word was not my absolute bond, and, in time, I realized that this was the fundamental flaw in my character that had been my undoing. The only way to prevent repetition was to change my own mode of operation, and so I no longer deceive. Ever. And no one deceives me. It was a fair answer. The evil magician was, in many respects, the opposite of the popular image. Instead of being ugly, weak, and mean, Humphrey fitted that description better. He was handsome, strong, and urbane, yet he was the villain, and Bink knew better than to let fair words deceive him. Fanchon, stand forth, Trent said. Fanchon stepped forward, open cynicism on her face. Trent did not gesture or chant. He merely glanced at her with concentration. She vanished. A soldier swooped in with a butterfly net, slamming it down on something. In a moment he held it up, a struggling, baleful, lizard-like thing with wings. It really was a basilisk. Bink quickly averted his eyes, lest he look directly at its horrible face and meet its deadly gaze. The soldier dumped the thing into a cage, and another smoke-protected soldier shoved on the lid. The remaining soldiers relaxed visibly. The basilisk scrambled around, seeking some escape, but there was none. It glared at the wire confinement, but its gaze had no effect on the metal. A third soldier dropped a cloth over the cage, cutting off the view of the little monster. Now Bink himself relaxed. The whole thing had obviously been carefully prepared and rehearsed. The soldiers knew exactly what to do. Bink, stand forth, Trent said, exactly as before. Bink was terrified, but a corner of his mind protested. It's still a bluff. She's in on it. They have it rigged to make me think she was transformed and that I'll be next. All her arguments against Trent were merely to make her seem legitimate, preparing for this moment. Still, he only half believed that. The omen lent it a special awful conviction. Death hovered, as it were, on the silent wings of a moth hawk, close. Yet he could not betray his homeland. Weak-kneed, he stepped forth. Trent focused on him. Trent focused on him, and the world jumped. Confused and frightened, Bing scrambled for the safety of a nearby bush. The green leaves withered as he approached, then the net came down, trapping him. Remembering his escape from the gap dragon, he dodged at the last moment, backtracking, and the net just missed. He glared up at the soldier who, startled, had allowed his smoked glasses to fall askew. Their gazes met, and the man tumbled backward, stricken. The butterfly net flew wide, but another soldier grabbed it. Bink scooted for the withered bush again, but this time the net caught him. He was scooped inside, wings flapping helplessly, tail thrashing and getting its barb caught in the fabric. Claws snarled, beak snapping at nothing. Then he was dumped out. 2 shakes, 3, and his claws and tails were dislodged. He landed on his back, wings outspread. An anguished squawk escaped him. As he righted himself, the light dimmed. He was in the cage, and it had just been covered, so that no one outside could see his face. He was a cockatrice. Some demonstration. Not only had he seen Fanchon transformed, he had experienced it himself, and killed a soldier merely by looking at him. If there were any skeptics in Trent's army, there would be none now. He saw the curling barbed tail of another of his kind, a female, but her back was to him. His cockatrice nature took over. He didn't want company. Angrily, he pounced on her, biting, digging in with his talons. She twisted around instantly, the muscular serpent's tail providing leverage. For a moment, they were face to face. She was a hideous, frightful, loathsome, ghastly, and revolting. She was hideous, frightful, loathsome, ghastly, and revolting. He had never before experienced anything so repulsive, yet she was female, and therefore possessed of a certain fundamental attraction. The paradoxical repulsion and attraction overwhelmed him, and he lost consciousness. When he awoke, he had a headache. He lay on the hay in the pit. It was late afternoon. It seems the stare of a basilisk is overrated, Fanchon said. Neither of us died. So, it had really happened. Not quite, Beak agreed, but I feel a bit dead. As he spoke, he realized something that had not quite surfaced before. The basilisk was a magical creature that could do magic. He had been an intelligent cockatrice who had magically stricken an enemy. What did that do to his theory of magic? Well, you put up a good fight, Fanchon was saying. They've already buried that soldier. It is quiet like death in this camp now. Like death. Had that been the meaning of his omen? He had not died, but he had killed, without meaning to, in a manner completely foreign to his normal state. Had the omen been fulfilled? Bink sat up, another realization coming. Trent's talent is genuine. We were transformed. We really were. It is genuine. We really were, she agreed somberly. I admit, I doubted, but now I believe. He must have changed his back while we were unconscious.